Hey guys, I want to take a minute and do a little bit of a devotional for you today. This was something that was shared with me today, and I'd seen it maybe in a slightly different light. Um, I've heard this parable before, but it was something that was kind of a new aspect of it that I hadn't quite put together in the past. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 8, and this is verses 5 through 8, and this is talking about the parable of the sower. Most of you guys are probably familiar with it, but Jesus is speaking to to the disciples and to the other people here, and he says, "A sower went out to sow his seed, and he sowed, and some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden down, and the fowls of the air devoured it. And some fell upon a rock, and as soon as it was sprung up, it withered away, because it lacked moisture. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked it. And other fell on good ground, and sprang up, and bare fruit 100-fold. And when he had said these things, he cried, He that hath ears to hear, let him hear." And he goes on to speak here in verses 11 through 18. Jesus actually explains what this parable means. One of the few places where Jesus actually breaks down the parable and explains to his disciples what exactly he means. And what he explains here is that the seed that is being thrown is the gospel. The birds that pick this up are representative of Satan or his demons and things like this. The ground, the different types of ground that it falls on, are the different conditions of the heart of man. And then the rocky soil is somebody who receives the seed freely and willingly, just very easily, but then we later find out that because that seed lacked the ability to dig deep roots into the soil, it withered away as soon as trials and tribulations came. And this is something that is actually talked about in 1 John chapter 2 as well, when he says that the reason that they went out from us is because they were never actually with us. There will be some who kind of come into the faith, but then as soon as trials and tribulations and testings and things like that come, what's really manifested, or their true heart and intention is manifested, that they were never actually really there for Christ. They were there for other reasons. So, and then one of the other things, one of the other types of soil that I wanted to focus on here, and this is the type that was really kind of presented to me in a slightly different aspect today, is the seed that fell on ground, and then it was choked out by the weeds and the thorns and things like this. And Jesus goes on and talks about how the weeds and the thorns are the cares and concerns of this world. And one of the things that was presented to me today is that weeds are really a sign of neglect. They are a sign, especially in an agricultural type society where farming is prevalent. Weeds are a sign of the farmer basically not getting out there to tend the soil. And what they have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to compete for the nutrients that the plants that the farmer is actually planting is trying to produce. And we see this as in a couple different lights. Number one, as it competes for the nutrients, it competes for the nutrients that the actual seed, the gospel, is feeding off of as well. And this is kind of symbolic of the fact that a lot of times there are things that are competing for our attention, whether it be in prayer, whether it be in our faith in general, in our growth. There are things that are often competing for our attention and are often trying to lure us away. And sometimes it's not as overt as, denounce Christ or something like that, or give up church to come over here and do this activity. Sometimes it's something that is very subtle and kind of below the surface, that simply just competes with our attention, such that we're not focused when we actually sit down and read our Bible, and we're not really focused when we sit down and pray and listening to the Father and so on and so forth. So we're told in 2 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 1, he had just given some promises in the previous verses in chapter 6, but he says, having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. And one of the things that we're kind of told to do here is we're told to purge out those things that are competing for our attention, that are competing for our affections, competing for our thoughts and our time. There's nothing wrong with having other interests, but when those things start to take precedence over our time with the Father and over our time in growth, when they start to compete for the nutrients of our heart, namely our attention and our focus, then those things have to go. And as husbandmen, we weed those things out. We remove those weeds so that that seed of the gospel can actually grow deeper and can sink in deeper roots, and we can grow and develop more as Christians. So I wanted to share that with you guys today. So, all right, God bless.